I flew home 2 days earlier than planned and found my 8-year-old daughter on her knees scrubbing the kitchen floor with a dish rag that had seen better days. The house was too quiet. One of those silences that presses against your eardrums and tells you something is horribly wrong. They'd taken their real granddaughter to the amusement park for the day. I didn't yell. I didn't sob. I did the thing that felt like the only reasonable response. I gathered what belonged to us, put Lily's favorite stuffed horse into a tote, left a note on the counter, and walked out of a life that had been quietly corroding for months. Hi, I'm Maya. I'm 34. I work in claims, insurance, the antiseptic industry of other people's catastrophes. For a living, I catalog damage, assign numbers, make spreadsheets that make pain look tidy. Emotions are a liability at my desk. Empathy is a line item. I had arranged my life the same way. Neat, predictable, no scenes. It mostly worked until it didn't. Lily is 8. She draws impossibly detailed ponies, packs them into imaginary stables, and asks questions that stop me in my tracks. Why clouds don't fall down, whether colors can be shy. Daniel, well, at the time he was Daniel, my husband in all the legal ways that matter, had a daughter too. Ava was 10, quick with a smirk and an allergy to anything that smelled like patience. Her mother moved to Texas years before the divorce wrapped up. Daniel and I both came into that half-finished family offering the usual Hallmark promises. We'll blend, the kids will adjust, love will win. For a while, I let myself believe it. When we first coupled, we rented a small place that smelled faintly of lemon and new beginnings. We were clumsy and hopeful and broke in the way that feels cinematic. Then jobs shifted, paychecks shrank, and an offer landed on the table disguised as help. Daniel's parents said they were struggling, and could we, just for a little while, move into their house? It had a sagging porch, a flag on the lawn, begonias in mismatched pots. It seemed practical. It seemed temporary. It felt like a trap wrapped in a bow. I should have noticed the fault lines then. I didn't. Instead, I convinced myself we were adults who could endure anything if we kept our heads down and worked harder. I put in extra hours. I took on more clients. I watched my paycheck, my clean credit, my reliable direct deposit, become the invisible mortgage glue for a house I did not own. Officially, it was a family contribution. Unofficially, it felt like paying rent to people who considered my daughter the guest. Daniel's mother had a way of speaking that sounded like kindness, but landed like judgment. Sweetheart, she'd call me in the kind of voice that made you want to apologize for existing too loudly. His father hummed in the background like static on a radio, present but easy to ignore. Amanda Ava slipped into the center of everything with the ease of a kid used to being prioritized. She had her shelf in the bathroom, a permanent command of the armchair by the TV, an automatic slice of indulgence at dinner. Lily started off sharing a room, and 2 weeks later she didn't. Amanda doesn't sleep well, they said. I smiled and adjusted Lily's bed to the hallway. Don't be the wife who starts trouble, I told myself. Keep the peace. Then the slow erosion began. Small cuts at first, cookies suddenly off the menu, sugary treats quietly disappearing from the pantry under the guise of discipline. Grandma Martha, Daniel's mother, made a hobby of erasing Lily in gentle increments. We just like things tidy, she'd say, as if dignity could be arranged on a shelf like a decorative plate. Lily stopped leaving drawings on the fridge. She started hiding them in a backpack. She learned very young that the right kind of child is invisible enough to be acceptable, but not enough to be loved. Money tightened. Daniel lost his job to corporate reshuffling. I took more overtime. My calm, level voice at work became the only stable thing we had. The mortgage slipped into my name because logistically it made sense. Really what it did was hand me the bill for living in someone else's hierarchy. My money kept their lights on while their disdain for my child grew more refined. When the teacher emailed saying Lily seemed withdrawn and fatigued, the first panic hit like a cold wave. I sat with the message and tried to parse it like an incident report. At home, she kept to herself at the table. The songs she'd used to sing with her cereal, silly, bright things about rainbows and Tuesdays, stopped. She began to shrink into herself. Once, at Ava's birthday party, she sat in a corner pretending to clap. She later told me that Grandma had warned her not to get in the way. I couldn't laugh, she said. They told me to be small. Daniel would shrug when I asked him why his mother treated Lily like a guest. She just doesn't relate to her the same way, he'd say. She's old-fashioned. She means well. That phrase, "she means well," became a bullet I kept catching in my mouth. It didn't mean anything. It was a courtesy. It was a pause before cruelty. So I did what a lot of mothers do when the polite scaffolding fails. I gathered evidence. I paid attention until the pattern was undeniable. I heard the way Ava snapped at Lily like a practiced reflex. I overheard Martha say, "Don't touch her things. You'll only make a mess." I watched Lily start to make herself small on purpose. The realization crystallized slow and ugly. This wasn't a series of miscommunications. It was a deliberate campaign of exclusion. It was not malicious in the grotesque cinematic way. It was gentled cruelty, the sort of thing that drills a child out of belonging one polite comment at a time. Then came the day that collapsed whatever patience I had left. I cut my trip short, thinking of pizza, cartoons, blanket forts, comfort, simple domestic recovery. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that underlined everything. I found Lily scrubbing the tile with a rag too big for her hands. Her knees were raw with effort. When I asked where everyone was, she said plainly, "They went to the park. I'm grounded." Not an explanation, a verdict. She sounded as if being left alone was normal procedure. I packed a bag. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "You left a child alone as punishment. You took your real granddaughter to the park. My daughter will not spend another night in this house." Then I drove us to a motel, a red neon sign flickering like a bad omen. Lily ate an entire pint of vanilla ice cream while cartoons looped soft and ridiculous on the television. We drew ponies. I sat up and watched her breathe. She told me small things at first, fragments that fit together like pieces of a broken vase. How Amanda said she wasn't part of the family, how she once didn't get a slice of cake because she didn't earn dessert, how she was told she was a guest, how Grandma had told her that her mother had enough trouble with her already. The thing about cruelty that is normalized is how slowly it becomes visible. It coils around a child's confidence until the kid starts to believe the narrative they've been fed, that they are the problem. When Lily finally let herself cry in the motel room, it wasn't just sadness. It was a sob that came from every compromised assumption being upended at once, from a little girl realizing that the adults she trusted had allowed her to be diminished. She cried until she had no air left and then, exhausted, fell asleep in my arms. I made a decision in that dim fluorescent light that felt both enormous and unmistakably right. We were leaving. Permanently. I logged into the mortgage account from the motel bed and turned off the auto pay. No speeches, no fireworks, just a quiet, irrevocable click. I emailed our lawyer asking to release me from any co-signed obligations. I called the police and filed a report about a child left alone as punishment. The officer took notes with the same deliberate care I applied to homeowner claims at work. "We'll assign a caseworker," he said, and for the first time in months, something in me breathed. We were small for a while. Motel dinners, mismatched cups, the shambling improvisation of two people making a life after tearing the old one down. Lily's smile returned in the little ways. A drawing propped on the dresser, a song hummed into the pillow. I bought her a new set of markers and watched her draw a house with a loud rainbow roof. Across the top she wrote, "Here I'm loved." It was, in its blunt innocence, a verdict as binding as any legal document. When I filed the formal complaint and the social worker came to talk to Lily, the girl spoke with the clarity of someone who had rehearsed the small truths for months. She recounted being left alone, the way strangers had become the safe ones because her family had forgotten how to be protective. That statement, given calmly, plainly, set in motion what would become a formal investigation, and eventually a fracture that would not quietly mend. The decisions I made in those motel hours were not dramatic. They were necessary. They were the quiet administrative acts of someone who had the means to stop paying for other people's dysfunction, and the courage to say that my daughter's ease was not negotiable. For now, in that new, tiny apartment we would find a few weeks later, Lily slept with her pony blanket and stickers she plastered across her closet. We got a cat that purred like forgiveness. I started working from home when I could and took Lily to the schoolyard, to the counselor, to lazy weekend bakery runs. The days were smaller and softer. Sometimes I think about everything I could have done differently, the fights I didn't start, the arguments I swallowed. But mostly, I keep my hand on the soft curve of Lily's back and remind her, and myself, that being brave sometimes looks like turning your back on the polite cruelty of others and walking toward your child. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before sunrise. First a text, then another, then a cascade of missed calls that seemed endless. Daniel. His name filled my screen like a ghost I wasn't ready to confront. I let it ring. Then came the voicemail, his voice trembling with something that might have been guilt, but sounded more like damage control. Maya, please. It was a misunderstanding. Mom just overreacted. You know how she is. We weren't far. We checked on her. I ended the message halfway through. A misunderstanding is forgetting a lunch date. Leaving an 8-year-old alone as punishment is not. The weight of his excuses settled like static in the room. Lily was still asleep, her arm draped over the stuffed pony I'd tucked under her last night. I couldn't look at that little face and imagine ever taking her back into that house. Later that day, Daniel's mother called from a number I didn't recognize. Her voice was clipped, the sweetness gone. You've made a spectacle of this, she snapped. Discipline isn't abuse, dear. Maybe if you were around more, we wouldn't have to teach Lily respect. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. I hung up without answering. I didn't owe her civility anymore. I owed my daughter peace. The first few days at the motel were an odd mixture of relief and chaos. There's something freeing about stripping your life down to a single suitcase and a child who finally laughs again. I took a week off work, unpaid but necessary, and spent the days with Lily. We built pillow forts out of cheap motel cushions, watched documentaries about wild horses, and painted paper hearts that bled color through napkins. It was the first time I'd heard her giggle in months, that wild, unguarded laugh that used to fill our apartment before everything turned rigid. At night, I made lists. I've always been a planner, even when my life fell apart. I listed what I needed to cancel: joint accounts, utilities, credit lines, all the invisible threads that still tied me to that house and that family. Each bullet point felt like a small rebellion, a reclaiming of oxygen. When I finally checked my email again, I saw the confirmation from the lawyer. We've initiated the mortgage withdrawal process. It may take a few weeks. Weeks or not, it was happening. For the first time in years, I wasn't paying for the privilege of being disrespected. Then came the aftermath, the blowback you always expect, but never quite prepare for. Daniel began his campaign of contrition. He texted pictures of Lily's toys left behind. Her art set, a small plush dolphin, a half-finished puzzle. He sent messages like, "You're overreacting, Maya. Mom loves her. She didn't mean it that way. Then you can't do this to us, we're a family." Then finally, the guilt bomb. "Lily's going to grow up thinking her dad didn't care. Is that what you want?" The thing about emotional manipulation is that it only works when you still believe in the other person's moral compass. I didn't. Not anymore. I ignored him for days. When he realized silence was all he'd get, he switched tactics. A letter arrived at the motel front desk, scrawled in his messy handwriting. "I didn't protect you like I should have. I was just trying to keep the peace. Please come home. We can fix this. Home." I stared at that word until it blurred. A house where my daughter was treated like an inconvenience could never be called a home. About a week later, there was a knock on our motel door. For a moment, panic rippled through me. What if it was them? But it wasn't. It was a woman with a clipboard and a badge. "Ms. Alvarez? I'm with the Department of Child and Family Services. May I come in?" My pulse steadied. Of course. The caseworker, Ms. Dalton, had kind eyes and a tone that was equal parts professional and kind. She asked gentle questions. How long was Lily alone? Has this happened before? Did she seem scared? I answered everything carefully. Facts only, no bitterness, just the truth laid out in clean, unshakable lines. When Lily spoke, she didn't tremble. She said simply, "They left me there because Grandma said I was being too loud." Ms. Dalton's pen paused mid-sentence. Her face softened. She looked at Lily and said, "You were very brave to tell the truth." When the interview was done, she assured me they'd follow up. "You did the right thing, Maya," she said at the door. "This kind of thing often gets buried, but you did the right thing." Those words, the right thing, replayed in my head for days. Then, the real fallout began. A week after the report, Daniel showed up at Lily's school. He waited near the gates, pretending to be casual. I saw him as I drove up for pickup, leaning against his car, holding something behind his back. When Lily saw him, she froze. He stepped forward with a stuffed pony in his hand. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "I missed you." I got out of the car fast, my voice low but sharp. "You can't be here." He looked at me, tired, maybe desperate, but I didn't care. "Maya, please. She's my daughter, too." "Then you should have acted like it," I said. "You let them break her." He tried to say more, but Lily had already turned away, clutching my sleeve. "Let's go, Mom," she whispered. That was the last time he saw her face to face. Of course, the in-laws weren't done. The next week, I received a letter from their lawyer, a formal complaint to CPS alleging I was emotionally unstable and endangering the child's well-being. They claimed I'd been absent and vindictive. Reading it was like stepping into a funhouse mirror. All the right words twisted backward, but I was ready. I had the receipts, teacher reports, counselor notes, bank transfers showing my financial support of their household, and most importantly, the police report from the day I found Lily alone. CPS opened a parallel investigation, standard procedure. Ms. Dalton came again, reviewed everything, spoke to Lily privately. Afterward, she smiled at me. "She's resilient," she said. "That's because of you." When they visited Daniel's parents, the facade cracked. Martha, his mother, tried her usual performance, the delicate martyr routine. "She's turning Lily against us. We were just trying to teach discipline." The caseworker didn't flinch. "Did you leave a minor alone for an extended period of time?" Martha hesitated, eyes darting to Daniel. "Well, yes, but no buts," the caseworker interrupted. "That's neglect under state law." After that, everything changed. CPS issued a formal warning. Their home would be monitored. Amanda, Ava, would be checked on regularly. Daniel received a written notice stating that any further complaints could affect his custody rights. For a family obsessed with appearances, it was the perfect punishment, public and procedural. That's when the rage began. "You destroyed us." Martha screamed in a voicemail that arrived the next morning, all over one mistake. "You'll regret this." Daniel texted me, "You're going too far. Don't drag my parents through this." I didn't respond to either of them. Instead, I forwarded every message to my lawyer. Each one was another nail in the coffin of my patience. Then came the second mortgage notice. The bank was done with grace periods. Without my payments, the house began its slow march toward foreclosure. And when that notice arrived, the tone of their messages shifted from outrage to desperation. "Please, Maya, don't let them lose the house," Daniel begged over the phone. "It'll kill them." "They made their choice," I said. "They can live with the consequences." "You don't mean that." "Oh, I do," I said, steady. "For years I paid for a house that broke my child. Now they can pay their own bills." Click. Silence. Liberation. As the weeks passed, Lily began to heal in ways that startled me. She slept through the night without nightmares. She started drawing again, more ponies, but now they had wings. She made new friends at school. Her counselor said her confidence was returning, slowly but surely. One afternoon, while we baked cookies, she said, "Mom, I think our new house smells like sunshine." I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. "What does sunshine smell like?" "Like safety," she said simply. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat on the balcony of our tiny apartment and watched the city lights. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel anxious or guilty or tethered to someone else's idea of family. I just felt free. A few months later, the foreclosure became official. I didn't even have to check. A friend from work sent me the listing. 3-bedroom colonial, needs renovation, sold as is. Same chipped shutters, same cracked steps. A red foreclosed stamp across the photo. Martha and her husband moved into a trailer park on the edge of town, still telling anyone who'd listen that they were just in transition. Daniel moved in with them, claiming it was temporary. But 6 months later, they were still there, a family defined by bitterness and faded wallpaper. Meanwhile, our life moved forward quietly. I redecorated Lily's room with bright yellow curtains and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. She named our cat Pumpkin. Every morning before school, she'd whisper to him, "Guard the house while we're gone." Sometimes I'd catch her watching me while I worked, sketchbook in hand. One evening, she showed me a drawing, a small figure standing in front of a huge storm cloud, shielding a smaller one behind her. Beneath it, she'd written, "Mom keeps the rain away." I lost it. Not the composed kind of crying, but the deep, silent kind that shakes through your ribs. I hugged her and said, "You're the bravest kid I know." She smiled. "I got it from you." Months later, the CPS case officially closed, unsubstantiated. The report said Lily was well-adjusted, safe, and thriving. Those words were better than any verdict. Daniel tried one last time, an email this time. Long, rambling, a mix of nostalgia and blame. "I miss what we had. We were happy once. Maybe I should have stood up to them. Maybe it's not too late." I typed for a long time before replying. "You were there, Daniel. You watched. And you did nothing. That's worse than what they did. Don't contact us again. I didn't send it right away." I stared at the blinking cursor, the endless possibility of reconciliation that people like me always imagine even after the damage is done. Then I hit send. It felt final. Now, a year later, life has grown smaller but richer. I still work in insurance, still catalog disasters, but I no longer live in one. Lily and I bake cupcakes on weekends, feed stray cats, and plant beans on the balcony. She calls them her freedom plants. Some evenings, when the light hits just right, I think about the woman I used to be. The one who thought keeping peace was the same as keeping love. I wish I could tell her that silence in the face of cruelty is just another form of surrender. Now I know better. Because the night I walked out of that house wasn't an ending. It was the first time I truly chose us. And in doing so, I taught my daughter something no one can ever unteach her, that love is not supposed to hurt, and that walking away can be the most powerful kind of revenge there is. 6 months after the case closed, the world felt different. Not louder or brighter, just calmer. There were still moments when I'd wake up expecting to hear someone else's voice, that sharp, clipped tone calling me sweetheart in a way that always meant the opposite. But instead, I'd hear the gentle hum of our refrigerator, the soft thud of our cat jumping off Lily's bed, or the muffled sound of her singing in the next room. That's what healing sounds like, I realized. It's not triumphant or cinematic. It's ordinary, peaceful, unremarkable, and that's what makes it so powerful. We'd settled into a small apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a narrow balcony, and enough sunlight to make mornings feel alive again. I worked remotely most days, my laptop perched beside a coffee mug that perpetually smelled of cinnamon. Lily would do her homework beside me, occasionally drawing little hearts on my sticky notes or doodling ponies galloping across the corners of my spreadsheets. Our life had shrunk in scale, but it had expanded in meaning. Every simple act felt significant now. Packing her lunch, walking her to school, watching her laugh without fear of being shushed. It wasn't a glamorous revenge story. No explosive confrontation, no courtroom finale. Just quiet victories stacked on top of each other until they built a life we could finally call ours. Every now and then, I'd still get updates about Daniel and his parents. Not intentionally, just gossip that floated through mutual friends or social media posts that found their way onto my feed. The house had been sold at auction. The bank took what was owed, and the rest vanished into debt collectors' hands. Martha and her husband moved into a small trailer on the outskirts of Joliet. They told neighbors it was temporary, that they were downsizing until the market recovers. That was almost laughable. The market wasn't their problem. Accountability was. Daniel, predictably, was living with them. "Just until I get back on my feet," he said, though it had been months and he still hadn't left. I heard he was doing odd jobs. Nothing steady, nothing that resembled the man he once pretended to be. His parents called him a victim of my vindictiveness. He called himself unlucky. But in truth, luck had nothing to do with it. You can't build a foundation on someone else's exhaustion and expect it to hold. They tried to blame me for everything, the foreclosure, the CPS record, their ruined family reputation. It was easier than admitting they'd destroyed themselves long before I stopped helping. That was the thing about people like them. They needed someone else's stability to feed their chaos. When I cut the supply, they starved on their own dysfunction. I didn't need to watch them fall. Just knowing they had to live inside the consequences they built was enough. One afternoon, I stopped by a small cafe after picking Lily up from school. She sat across from me sipping hot chocolate, her cheeks smudged with cocoa, her eyes bright and curious as always. "Mom?" she asked suddenly. "Do you think bad people know they're bad?" The question hit me harder than it should have. I set my coffee down, thinking carefully. I don't think they always do, I said. Some people convince themselves they're right so they don't have to feel guilty. Like Grandma? The word grandma came out small, but not broken. She wasn't afraid of it anymore, just curious. Yeah, I said softly. Like her. Lily thought for a moment, twirling the spoon in her cup. Do you think she misses us? I smiled sadly. Maybe. But missing someone doesn't mean you should have them back. She nodded, as if she understood more than most adults ever could. Then she changed the subject, telling me about a class art project where she'd drawn a giant horse with wings made of stars. It's a freedom horse, she said proudly. It can fly anywhere it wants. I laughed. Sounds perfect. She grinned. It is. I made two. Two? One for you. And that was the moment I knew we were okay. Not perfect, not healed all the way, but okay. Later that spring, CPS officially closed the file with a final note. Child is safe, stable, and thriving under maternal care. It was the bureaucratic way of saying, you did it. Daniel tried one last time, an email, long and rambling, full of half apologies and nostalgia. I made mistakes. I should have defended you. I should have stopped Mom. I just didn't know how. Maybe if we could talk? Maybe if we could try again for Lily's sake. It was written like a confession, but all I saw were excuses disguised as regret. I typed slowly, deliberately. You knew, Daniel. You watched it happen. You heard the things they said and you did nothing. That's not love, that's cowardice. Please don't contact us again. I hesitated before sending it, part of me still clinging to the ghost of who I thought he was. Then I hit send and felt the weight lift from my chest like dust leaving the air. That was the true ending. Not the police reports, not the foreclosure, not the official statements, just one final, irreversible no. In the months that followed, Lily bloomed. She made friends, joined art club, laughed at everything. Every little milestone felt like redemption. We adopted a small gray cat named Pumpkin who thought he was a guard dog. Every morning, Lily would whisper, "Guard the house while we're gone," and he'd blink as if he understood. On weekends, we baked cupcakes and pretended we were running a bakery called Sweet Freedom. It became our ritual to water the bean plants on the balcony together. The little vines had wrapped themselves stubbornly around the railing, stretching higher every week. One morning, Lily pointed at them and said, "Look, Mom, they're growing no matter what." I looked at her, stronger, braver, more alive than ever, and said, "Just like us." Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering what if. What if I'd yelled sooner? What if I'd confronted them head-on instead of keeping the peace? What if I'd stayed longer, trying to make it work? But every time those thoughts appeared, I'd look at Lily's drawings taped to our fridge, the ones full of color and light and movement, and I'd remember that leaving wasn't just escape. It was survival, and maybe that's what revenge truly is. Not the satisfaction of watching someone crumble, but the quiet defiance of rebuilding your life without them. Living well isn't about proving a point. It's about taking back the parts of yourself they tried to diminish and turning them into something beautiful. One bright Saturday morning, Lily asked if we could go horseback riding. She'd seen a flyer at school and had been saving her allowance. I said yes, even though it meant stretching my paycheck a little thinner that month. We drove an hour out to a small family farm. The smell of hay and sunshine hit us as soon as we arrived. Lily's excitement was contagious. When she climbed onto the back of a small chestnut pony named Daisy, she looked like pure joy personified. I watched her from the fence line, camera in hand, tears welling despite myself. The girl who once scrubbed someone else's kitchen floor was now riding through open fields, laughing, her voice echoing across the meadow like a melody. After the lesson, she ran toward me, cheeks flushed. "Mom, did you see? She let me steer by myself." "I saw, sweetheart." Then she hugged me tight, her face pressed against my jacket. "I'm glad you came home early that day." My heart clenched. "Me too, baby, me too." That night, after she fell asleep, I sat by her door, listening to her breathing. Deep, steady, peaceful. The kind of sleep a child deserves. I thought about everything that led here. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the silent dinners, the tiny humiliations I'd mistaken for patience. I thought about all the ways women are taught to keep the peace, to hold families together even when it's breaking them. And I thought about how freeing it felt to stop. People imagine revenge as something loud, shouting, breaking, exposing, but I've learned it's quieter than that. Revenge can be the gentle act of choosing peace over chaos, the quiet power of walking away without looking back. The night I walked out of that house wasn't my breaking point. It was my beginning. And the best part? Every single day since then has been my reminder that peace is the loudest victory there is. A year later, the old house was listed again. I stumbled across the ad by accident while scrolling through real estate listings. 3-bedroom suburban home, needs major renovation, sold as is. The photos showed peeling wallpaper, broken shutters, and an empty backyard. The caption read, "Previously foreclosed." I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the page. Some ruins aren't worth revisiting. Lily came into the room holding her latest drawing, a house with rainbow walls and 2 stick figures smiling under it. Across the top, she'd written, "Home, where love stays." She handed it to me and said, "This one's for our wall." And as I pinned it up next to her other drawings, I realized that this quiet little life, full of safety and sunlight and laughter, was the purest revenge of all.